Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Art Basel Miami Beach Conversations. We're very pleased to see you here in real life, and thank you to everyone who's also watching on Facebook Live. My name is Edward Winkleman, and our topic this afternoon is the sometimes prickly question of pricing in the contemporary art market. Fortunately, we have an absolute powerhouse panel to help us walk through both the history as well as the future of this question, including, starting on my far right, Esther Kim Varet from Various Small Fires, a gallery in Los Angeles and Seoul. Alexander Forbes, who is with Artsy, and I know his title is Head of Collective Services and Private Sales. Heather Flo from Flo Advisory, a art advisor out of New York. And our moderator today is Marian Maneker, the editorial director of Live Art, who has 20 years of history covering this particular market and question. And we're very pleased to have them all. Please join me in giving them a very warm welcome.
Thank you, Ed. And I suppose I should probably observe that when I first started doing this, especially online, talking about prices was considered something that, was vulgar, and we weren't interested in pricing. We were interested in the art, and we've come somewhat to an arc where it feels many times like all we talk about are the prices, and you really just want to talk about the art on occasion. Certainly the value is not in the dollars. The value is in the art itself, which is something worth remembering. The price is a function of distribution, and it plays a really interesting role. And I think I was earlier at one of the booths where someone has put the prices on the labels, and they were actually putting red stickers for the works that were sold. So it's somewhat, everything old is new again. And that seemed both refreshing and surprising, but also totally natural. And when we first started talking about this panel, it almost seemed like we could really spend some quality time answering the question, what is a price? Why do prices exist? How do they function? And what's the best way to think about them? And what I was hoping we could do, sort of quickly go through with each of the panelists, sort of talking from their perspectives, because we have an art dealer, we have an art advisor, so someone who sells the work, someone who helps buy the work, and then someone who studies the prices and the marketplace. I thought we could go sort of briefly with Esther explaining a little bit, how prices are set, how she views the role of prices in, her work, and then to talk a little bit with Heather about how she approaches prices, thinks about them, talks to her clients about them, and prepares them, I assume, and also somewhat cautions them and then we can talk a little bit with Alex about making sense of what we see in terms of prices and all. I'm hoping we can do that in 15 or 20 minutes, and then there will be plenty that will come up from that conversation. But I'm also hoping that fairly early in the process, we can open this up for questions. So please, if you have a question, we will try and get to them, and there will be mics going around. So I just wanted to prepare you for all of that. So with that introduction, Esther, could you explain a little bit about pricing and how it works with both you and maybe some of the other places you've worked?
Sure. Okay, so to kind of prepare for this, I started off by doing a simple Google search because I realized that my role on this stage was to maybe talk on behalf of galleries and why pricing opacity is something that has been a part of gallery practices for so long, and what kind of resistances and historically have been there in, basically making prices clear and apparent to the public at large. So I ran across a very interesting article in the New York Times from 1971, where the New York City Department of Consumer Affairs had done a 2-year investigation in New York City with secret agents going around to 25 galleries and trying to get prices and acting like the general public and trying to get prices. And what they came back with was a report that was nearly impossible. And so in 1971, a law was passed called the Truth in Pricing Act, which required all galleries, like any retail store, to very publicly and obviously display prices alongside the items that are being shown. And so what ended up happening actually was when that law was passed, the ADAA banded together and sued in the New York Supreme Court level this law and essentially stopped it from really taking effect. And so I had just joined the ADAA this year, so I called Maureen, who's the director of the ADAA, and I forwarded her the article, and I was like, this is so interesting. I was like, the ADAA historically has taken a position to protect galleries from displaying prices, and it's like, what's the deal now? And 40 years later, and she was like, honestly, we're really confused. like the answer is that there is no answer. And she and I actually got into a really interesting conversation about why the art world thrives on secrecy and why galleries thrive on secrecy, because basically I was joking earlier this week when I was walking to the art fair booth and I kept on running into collectors. I was like, I will see you in my carpet stand, because we are essentially black market dealers. And I was like, and I felt like it is a high-end black market where galleries really feel a lot of security in their ability to change prices depending on how they feel, what their mood is that day, or how they feel like that, whether or not it's an institution or whether or not it's a big collector, and you kind of take security in that. But I realize now that the trade-off, like many other dealers, is that by expanding and putting prices online, which we can go into with Artsy and all of that stuff, and making it clear to the public, especially because I have a gallery in Korea, and I have a lot of Chinese clients, and I have a lot of new clients, younger clients trying to enter the market now. I find that publishing prices very, obviously, online or whatever format that might be, really tears down the barrier of entry into art, into having a conversation with us. And so, and also you realize that a lot of the new collectors that are coming into the market have no idea why you would hide the prices. It's kind of like an old-fashioned tick that the gallery world has that is really being kind of faded out in real time with the rise of the internet. And
do you think part of it is that people were afraid that the price would put off buyers, and now with so much money in the world and so many people have made money, that some of these prices just aren't that scary to many of the new buyers?
Sorry, if I'm understanding your question correctly,
yeah.
I think that there is no. I don't think it was about the fact that it would a sticker, like people would have sticker shock. Yeah. I don't think it was ever about that. I think it was really about the dealer maintaining control of the prices in a way that could best serve the artist over time. So I think one of the biggest, right now, collectors benefit from having pricing available. Advisors and gallerists benefit because it is expanding our collector base pretty rapidly, because people don't feel like, going up and trying to ask for a price list, there's a huge barrier there for the public, for most people. That's like, galleries were built like churches to be intimidating. And, sorry. Is there like a fire drill? It's about.
They'll let us know, I promise.
And I think that basically the only people that the only players in the art world that might not benefit in the long run are the artists, because you cannot, if prices become too public and say an artist becomes very hot, I'm curious to hear, Heather, what you feel about this, and people know that, say, X artist was selling for $100,000, but as we know, artists have ups and downs in their careers, and if you don't have a record of that, you can adjust the price down over time and keep them afloat instead of completely destroying a career because they're published prices like auction records, and that keeps, so it's an interesting thing, because it's like you're like, okay, pricing transparency is good, but who is it good for? And I think that's the question that I kept on coming back to, which I don't want to, we only have 15 minutes. I could talk for all 15 of those minutes, but I will let other people talk.
I was going to say, well, you're going to do my job for me. So, no, there's a lot to be said about that. And Heather, I do want to go to you. I mean, one of the interesting thing about prices is, very few things in the world are actually sold for the sticker price. There's all sorts of, if it's not buy one, get one free, or there's a special discount for one period or another, or there's all sorts of other ways. If you pay over time, you pay different amounts and all. I mean, there's no single price is ever actually uniform to everyone across the board. But I'm curious to Esther's point, how do you approach it? First of all, how do your clients feel about prices? Are they expecting, okay, this number is I saw it online, or I was told this number, and that's the number I must pay, or do they approach it in a different way?
In the beginning, if they've never collected before, they think that the price that's given by the gallery is the price. And then I tell them, well, there's typically 10%, 15%, 20%, depending upon the gallery, the price of the artwork, and kind of what else you can commit to the artist. So if you say, I want to buy 3 pieces, then you'll probably have a higher discount. Most people walk in thinking that the price that the gallery gives them is the firm price, not understanding that it's malleable in different contexts. And when I'm kind of talking to them about price, I tell them, so this is what the gallery is asking. Here's what I think it could be. Here's what the past sales are. Here are what other works are for sale. And maybe all of that is on the primary market, and here's what the secondary market is. And then we're kind of looking at what the true fair market value is, which is what the work would sell between a willing buyer and a willing seller. And then I explain to them how sometimes that fair market value actually does not correlate with historical value, and how it may be affected by hype, trends, and kind of what Esther was saying, how things can go up and down, and how there's kind of long-term security in some ways by having a price maybe set in a retail value that's slightly lower than what a auction price might be.
But is it helpful for you to have prices listed in a public way in dealing with your client, or is that, Esther made the excellent point. It's like it benefits some people, but maybe not always the ones we think it benefits. Does it benefit your dealings with your client?
Totally. When we walk into a gallery, there's a completely asymmetrical relationship. The seller, the gallery, knows exactly what that price is, and they have to go through this huge barrier of entry of just asking for the price. And sometimes you get there and you realize, oh, I can totally afford this. I can buy a couple. Or you realize, wow, my budget was, I don't know, 50 grand, and this work is $5 million. Now I'm super embarrassed that I had a salesperson come out, and I have to kind of slowly back away from this commitment. And it would be better served for everyone's time if they'd just seen a checklist, and maybe even could have taken the checklist home, studied it, and then gotten back in touch and said what it is that they wanted.
You mean because it sets a reference point that it's within this realm. It's got this many zeros as opposed to 2 more zeros on the back of it.
Because sometimes, people walk in and they don't know. I had clients who, before they worked with me, they went into Loring Augustine and asked about a Christopher Wool, thinking that maybe, they had no idea. They were like, maybe this is $30,000, which obviously was not. And then they had to kind of say thank you very much and walk away. And so it's a huge part of my job, actually, for clients, is helping them understand pricing and going through that barrier of entry. And I don't think that it is absolutely necessary for that to be such a large percentage of an advisor's job.
And new clients, Esther made an excellent point about, there's a lot of new people coming in, they don't see it. Are new clients happy to see those prices? Is there sticker shock? Are they looking at some of these prices saying, are you nuts? Or are they saying, this is affordable, as you said, I'll get two?
Yeah, I don't think that seeing the price list has a detrimental value to the collectors who I know. It's much more informative. I mean, everyone has works that they can afford and that they can aspire for.
Alex, do you want to give us a better sense of, sort of the 30,000-foot view of being able to see all of this and the pricing on Artsy, how people are approaching it, and what the, I suppose it's the inferences people draw from those prices? I mean, we have already seen and heard a lot of sales reported at this fair. They're reported at numbers that there may have been a discount, there might have been other things involved there. How do you interpret all of that information, and how do people using Artsy approach that?
Yeah, well, we do have a really unique vantage point into the market because we work with over 3,400 galleries from 100 countries, the vast majority of the world's leading auction houses and art fairs as well. And I think if you look historically at the industry, we've only had public auction records to go off of when establishing a price and what might be fair, but that's such a narrow sliver of the market, even of the kinds of artists that show at Art Basel. And when we look at our data, it's pretty striking. An artwork, two similar artworks that are, one is published with its price public, is 5 times more likely to sell than one that is published and you have to contact the gallery to get the price. When we talk to our collectors, 2/3 of them say that not having that price available online has stopped them from buying a work. And to Esther's point, particularly with newer folks, 75% of those say they haven't bought a work that they would have otherwise liked to buy because there wasn't a price available. I think, as you said, a few years ago, a lot of galleries would have said it was completely gauche to put a price online, but that ship has sailed. I think 75% of the works that are uploaded to Artsy recently have their price public, and we're seeing a similar thing now with e-commerce adoption over the course of the pandemic, where people are really coming into wanting to transact quickly and easily with their credit card, be able to see where the work is when it's shipping, all of those things that you would expect in a normal marketplace coming to the art world. And it's great when you get calls from galleries and they say, hey, I've held off on adopting what we call buy now or make offer for 2 years. I finally uploaded a show to it, and I sold half the works in a couple of days to all new collectors on Artsy. And ultimately, that's in everybody's interest. I mean, our mission is to expand the art market, to bring more artists into more people's homes. We have an artificially small industry today, and we want to support the growth there. I think on the other side, we do also recognize that there are plenty of works that have a certain level of sensitivity to them, and we want to also support ways for people to transact more discreetly, more privately. And so I recently transitioned to a new role to lead our private sales and advisory teams, where we help connect people with those more sensitive or high-value works of art. And so while we see that, for the vast majority of artworks out there, that public price, a click-to-buy transaction, is going to drive the most sales back to the gallery and ultimately funds into artists' hands, we'll also support more discreet ways if that's the best way to get the collector the inventory that they want.
So Esther, I wanted to go back to working with the artists and setting prices. And, and I suppose it's complicated even more with you have galleries in Los Angeles and in Korea, so you've got both different locations and different regions, of which I'm sure pricing has different effects. When you work with an artist, do you involve them in the decisions around pricing, either around a show, or if there's a lot of demand for their work, when is the right time to raise their prices? Or is it the other way around, that's your responsibility, that's the part of what you provide for managing the artist's career and all? I'm just curious to hear more about how that works from your side.
So I work pretty closely, very closely with all of our artists about pricing. I want them to feel comfortable. A lot of artists feel like, especially when they start out, hear from other artists the dangers of pricing too high. And so, trust me, I'm a retail business, so I would like to price them as high as possible, but I want to do it in the good graces of the artist. And so I spend a lot of time talking with artists about pricing. Whenever there's a price increase, I notify them. I'm very, very transparent with them where we are, and I'm very honest with them with where their market is. Whether or not it's good or bad. It's because obviously you never want to be like, maybe we should price 20% down because the market isn't there anymore, or whatever it is. Like, that's a hard conversation.
We got to get this inventory moving.
Yeah,
it's good for you, good for me.
And so that's pretty important. And it's funny. Like, we introduce a lot of artists for the first time and give them their first solo shows. And the pricing thing at this stage of the game is really, you're just making up stuff. Like, you really are. I hate to say it, but you're just kind of feeling, you go by like some kind of like,
your experience and your knowledge of your you have a number of buyers and collectors who work with you. You have a sense of what they'll pay for.
And you sometimes test it with certain collectors before you actually put it out there. You're like, take a look at this new artist that's coming up. It's $20,000, or and you just see their reaction, and you kind of do some of your own little research before you actually put it out there. And so it is kind of, the pricing is really an art, and I know certain galleries especially, we have a reputation of being quite conservative considering the kinds of demand we have for certain artists. And so, but other galleries have the opposite reputation, and I think it's very important because I'm a young gallerist too, where I'm always looking in the kind of down 20 yards instead of 5 yards, we take it slow and easy, because I do, even in the gallery's short lifetime, we've seen artists spike up in popularity and then the demand for it totally disappear, and that happens so fast now. And so I think I think often of galleries or dealers that are in their 70s, how they might be okay with thinking about the 5-year term, because I don't know, no offense to anybody that's 70 in the crowd, but I'm just saying you're not really planning for the next 20 years for the artists. So I think sometimes there's a tendency for galleries at different stages to just spike everything for a short-term game, and so I think it's so interesting because the pricing of an artist really and how they kind of fare in the market, like, there is an art to the dealer, to what we do. And every dealer is different, and every dealer has their own philosophy, and you start identifying other dealers in the field that have similar philosophies with you, because if you get the wrong partnership for an artist that you're trying to stay conservative with, then it might, it's so interesting because you start feeling out. It's not a moral compass thing. It's just it's like.
Well, you can't both be selling the same artist for wildly different prices. We used to get that at art fairs where, you'd see similar works at different booths, $1 million apart and all, and everyone would sort of shrug like, this is embarrassing for everyone on both sides of it.
But yeah, I think that's the one thing that I've learned over the last few years is that there's so many different kinds of dealers out there that when you're kind of growing an artist from the ground up, you have to really be careful to make sure that the other partner galleries have similar philosophies to you, and that is, I don't know if that answers your question, but
it's a start. I'm not sure there are any answers to this question.
This
is a dynamic. Something Heather brought up earlier that I actually want to hear both of your responses to is the sense that discounts are pervasive. In theory, once you present more pricing information, that actually should remove the discounts, right? I mean, that's part of what happened in the car business, where people were like, I hate dealing with the car dealer and all the negotiation. Just give me a price that I want to pay, so I don't. And we've got these commercials now where it's like I don't have to deal with all the haggling. Just I get my car delivered to me and all. I don't know that we're there with art, but on your side, would you be happier with like, no, this is the price. Don't talk to me about 10, 20, whatever institutional discount, or I'm got a great collection or whatever. But just here's a number. If you want to pay it, you can have it. If you don't, would that be better than what we have today, or not so good from your perspective?
I think that to get to a point that's like that, it's going to take a bunch of people from the art world actually coming together and deciding together how that would operate to help everyone, to help the collectors, to help the artists, to help the dealers. I think that what happened in the automobile industry, which, I have a family member, my father. My father helps, he was one of the car dealers that helped start Saturn. And the way that Saturn worked is they got together, and it was a bunch of car dealers, people who worked in the factories, and GM executives, and they each had equal votes to how they would create the company. And then for 5 years, they decided how they would create the company in a way that would help bring trust to everyone within the industry through transparency. And that was very unique to the automobile industry, but it ended up creating a huge shift in the industry. So if you walked in, you knew that a sticker price was a sticker price. And if you needed to get an appraisal of your car, you could actually see the examples of like a book appraisal, so you knew exactly what your car cost. And I don't know if that should be a didactic example, because it's obviously a different industry, but I think it provides a kind of platform of how we could maybe get together as a group and kind of start to think about the issues in a larger, more shifting way. But one thing I was going to say to Esther's point also about pricing and kind of thinking about pricing is that for me and my clients, and I think a lot of collectors, let's say you have a budget of, $100,000, and then you're going through Art Basel and you're thinking, maybe I'll buy 2 pieces for $50,000. What you can buy for that price is so varied for either a young artist or an older artist, that it becomes kind of a mind trip sometimes to think, like, I could get this work on paper by Nancy Sparrow, or I could get this young artist. And it's so I think that there's something in that from the buyer side. If you start to kind of think about price and value in a different way. And I think that your kind of perspective on how to think longevity and like pricing in a much more stable view makes sense to me in that way.
It makes sense to me too. I mean, to your point, it's so interesting about this retail price, because everybody I think unless you're like really green to the art world, you know that there's no such thing as retail price.
There isn't in the retail world either. I mean, they're just like,
Exactly.
There's a number, but there's all sorts of different situations. You wait for a sale, or you buy it now, or but like I said, so it's not like this world is so different. It's just we're conditioned in the other ones to know what types of sales, and you make a decision about who gets the discount in what situations, rather than they're knowing it's President's Day and come on down to the car lot and
The crazy thing is that the richer you are, the bigger discount you want. It's like they're like the cheapest people I know, just like and
everyone likes a good deal.
Yeah, everybody wants a good deal. And I'm kind of like that as a consumer too, like shopping, I feel better getting something at 20% off. And I just think of the more money I spend, the more I save. It's like... But
flip it around. You've just talked about you've got several artists who've gone up and down, and there's always a period where people want to buy when it's up, and when same artist, same work, when maybe there's not so many people active in that market, suddenly they're risk averse, and they could get a better discount, but that's not the moment that they feel comfortable with it, because now it is much more risky with a younger artist. You don't know if this is a passing thing, what the rest of their career will play out like, and all. So I mean, there are different time elements to this, but it's also, let's not let the collectors off the hook, is what I'm saying, is they often have an opportunity that they pass up and then are chagrined when there's 4 other people in line for the same work.
Well, I think fundamentally, though, it's still a very large purchase for a lot of folks, and just getting a little bit of consideration in a deal can help get past that anxiety of purchasing something that is, larger than a car. It's easy to walk around here and throw around numbers and get very comfortable with, people buying a canvas for several $1 million, but we forget that, save if you're a billionaire, that's a significant amount of money. Even if you're talking about something that's $10,000, $50,000, it's a significant purchase for folks. So feeling like there's some consideration on the gallery's side can be helpful. And I think on the galleries too, what we see, we can see oftentimes how much a discount is being accepted in the make offer functionality. And sometimes you talk to galleries and like, yeah, I've had a rough month and I needed to move more work. And so we are taking a higher discount now, while still, as you said, not signaling to the world maybe where the artist market is at that particular moment.
I am curious, what is the highest percentage discount that you've gotten for a client?
Oh, Esther.
Come on, Esther shared. You need to share too,
I don't take
Heather.
discounts and share. It's private bedroom information. No. I would say that I think that during times of like the pandemic and during the financial recession, people who were willing to buy works that were of younger artists or works that were kind of artists that were often overlooked. I mean, I feel like we came in and I helped clients buy like a lot of pieces from galleries who just really needed to sell things. And it was not necessarily about the discount. It was more kind of thinking they have money, they want to help the gallery and the artist. And
what a diplomatic answer.
Is it possible for there to be something like dynamic pricing in this market? And by that I mean when, more like what happens in the auction market. When there's demand, there are ways that this has already been brought into it, either, asking people to buy more than one work. I mean, there are non-numerical ways to sort of add to the pricing and all. But I was just sort of curious, I mean, the boundaries between the auction market and the primary market aren't necessarily collapsing, but the information is there. And I'm just curious whether you think that it's possible where people are willing to pay more from a primary dealer to have the work.
I think people are willing to pay more, but I don't know if they should, because I think that goes back to the point that Esther and I were talking about, that people don't want to have paid more and then find out 5 years later, now that trends have changed, they just overpaid significantly because now the demand has changed and now the price has gone down, which is why then having stable pricing that's not kind of growing at such a large incremental value turns out to be good. Because let's say then you can decrease the price by a certain percentage in order to move it while keeping the retail price the same. And the people who previously bought around that retail price don't feel totally screwed over because they could have bought a work from the same series for like 30% less. I don't know, but that's from a buyer's side.
Alex?
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. I think that you do see it all the time in the private sales ecosystem, where you'll go back with an offer and people are piling into a certain artist market and prices go up and are a moving target as a deal crystallizes. But as you said, as those values get so differentiated from where an artist's career might suggest that kind of a fair market price would be, or where the primary market price is, if we're talking about secondary works, it can ultimately disserve the collector in the end. I mean, we have folks that'll come back and try to sell some of the abstract works that they bought in 2014, and it's really sad for them to hear that, hey, it's worth a fraction of what it used to be worth, and I think it dissuades people from getting involved in the market. We are in a weird industry where people expect their art to hold value where they wouldn't with most of the other luxury goods that they buy. And then to find out, wow, did I get overly excited about this piece and have it lose a lot of value, I think makes people maybe go buy a watch or something that they understand a little bit more at that onset.
There's no guarantee that watch is going to hold its value any better. It is a larger market and all, and so there's a likelihood of it. But there are plenty of watches that go up and down in value. I mean, this is true of real estate. This is true of financial assets. This is true of commodities. I mean, no price is stable, nor does it necessarily have this upward sloping path that we're spending so much time trying to create in this world. So we have different expectations, and there are a lot of people here who are involved in it for understanding the risk that's involved. And so I guess what I'm part of is like, are we protecting them from a risk they know that they're taking? And is that just so that we can attract more people into it, which makes sense. I mean, the auction houses have made a big effort to make higher sell-through rates over the last few years because they want people to understand that these things are valuable. It's not just a hit or miss. And so they'd rather sell more things that sell than a wide range that may or may not sell. And that's as much for bringing people in and getting them to understand that. And the galleries have somewhat the same interest in all of that. I mean, Esther brought up the ADAA. I mean, it's not every man for themselves or every gallery for itself. It's an industry, and people have to function within that industry. And it sort of feels like the pricing issue is still up in the air here. I mean, I think we've sort of moved towards wanting to see prices and all, but then the next sort of phase of that, how they function, seems to be still things that people are working out.
I think the art world feels very sexy to people because it is secretive. And there are a lot of barriers. And it feels exclusive once you get in. And I fear that the more pricing transparency there is, I don't know, I think we're going to have to invent new ways to create this aura of exclusivity or privilege. Not that those things are things that we should value, but it's just kind of what the art world is built on so far. And so I wonder kind of what kind of challenges will come that are unexpected in the long run, that other parts of how a gallery functions will have to renegotiate itself with more pricing transparency.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, but I do think that at least when we've talked to art collectors, the lack of information holds them back, and it holds back the market as a whole. And I think if you look at other markets out there, when you have a significant information asymmetry and sellers have a lot more information than the buyers, and they might not be willing to give up all of that information, it not only stops some transactions from happening, but it also pushes people more towards name brands. And we see that in the art market all the time. There are certain pockets that get very trendy, that feel validated, and people pile in. I think as a marketplace, we've put a lot of effort into having as much information out there and having that be, whether that's market information, career information, and our collectors value that transparency and the ability to get everything that they need without necessarily having a conversation. I think, maybe past generations have valued that exclusivity, that they were in the elite club that got the information. But when you talk to folks who are younger and are going to inherit $64 trillion worth of wealth in the next few years, they want to transact in much the same way that they transact on everything else. And so I think it's kind of on us to continue to evolve and maybe figure out new ways to have it feel clubby but not withholding.
I mean, it's kind of like a really twisted problem to have, but
no,
let's try to make it more clubby.
I think that is probably the most important point here, and certainly the art world isn't the only one struggling with that. I mean, the whole luxury goods world has been struggling with how do you keep a sense of it being a luxury, an exclusive, but also expand your market. And I don't think there are any easy answers to this. Again, this is why what you do as an art in the terms of pricing and representing the artist and all and managing their career, not something that there's just a simple formula and boom, it can be done that way. You look like you wanted to say something, and I want to go to you, but I first just want to mention there are microphones. If you have a question, please raise your hand. I'm not sure who's got the microphones, but we'll try and get you a microphone. But while that happens, let me go back to you, Heather. You were.
I don't know if I have a question.
Oh, I thought you had something to say to
I'm always thinking.
But let's go back to the exclusivity issue, because you deal with people coming into this, and they need you as a guide because it's a difficult world. And I agree, everyone complains about, it's this unregulated world, and that's part of the appeal, the swashbuckling nature of, I bought this from those, fancy art dealers, and, I live to tell the tale with it. Do you think that if it were more straightforward, more of a retail transaction, that many of your clients would still feel the same attraction?
I feel like that helping them move through the transaction in that way is not the large majority of my job. The large majority of my job is helping them know what artists are out there and how the artists who are out there might be a good fit for them and their collection, and then kind of helping them understand, if they are, what works are the right works. And I think the idea of then how to get that work, that doesn't have to be a part of the advisor. I feel like a huge part of it is just my knowledge and my eye. Yeah.
And so it's more about helping them understand where their taste might lie or what their collecting goals might be achieved by than necessarily worrying about protecting them against the sharks.
Correct.
Okay. The question there, and then we'll come to you. I think there's a second microphone, if you could come up front.
Hi, I'm Kimberly at 1013 Artistry, Kimberly Gladfelter Graham. So if I missed something in the beginning, I'm sorry. I was just walking from Untitled. I'm really glad you mentioned Subaru, because that was a market disruptor. And at Untitled, NFTs are everywhere, and that's a market disruptor. And forgive me if I didn't hear you talk about that, but that's going to be a huge issue because commodity and market and price is baked into that. And that's a lot about what it is transparency. It's other things. I'm not talking necessarily about the artistry itself. That has a lot to evolve and remain to be seen. But the market part of it, it's a disruptor. Can you speak to that at all?
Does anyone want to talk about
I'll
NFTs?
take a flyer on NFTs. I think there's a lot that we can learn about, particularly the secondary market for NFTs. If you look at how OpenSea does resale, I think it's a completely frictionless process, and there are a lot that art marketplaces like ours and the rest of the art market can learn from that. I think the NFT market is still somewhat separate from art collecting today. When we talk to art collectors, now granted this was the summer and a lot's changed since then, I think about 6% of them had purchased an NFT, and maybe another 9% were interested in getting involved in the market. But I think a big part of that and the challenge there is also curation. And so, for a lot of folks, you hear NFT and maybe somebody lumps in NBA Top Shots with Beeple and who knows what else. And there hasn't been as much validation in the way that galleries do or art fairs do of what's important, what to pay attention to, what might hold its value or grow in value over time. And so I think we'll play more of a role there in the future. But I don't see it necessarily disrupting the art market. It is just another factor within the art market that we think about really differently than, painting versus sculpture versus video art. As long as it's of a certain quality that we feel good about putting forward to our collectors.
I would also point out that the pricing in NFTs is not often what it appears to be. We are quoted prices in dollars, but very few people pay in dollars. And if you can tell me what ETH is right now, I'll give you a prize, because most of us don't know. And you saw Sotheby's tried to do an auction in Ether, and it was a cumbersome and difficult affair. And part of what's going on there is we're quoting dollar prices for something that people aren't paying dollars for, which is validating the market in a way that if you don't own the right cryptocurrency, it will cost you a great deal more to buy that cryptocurrency today, to buy in it, than if you've been holding that cryptocurrency for 8 months or even 2 or 3 years. So I mean, this whole interest in it, the NFTs are one thing, paying in cryptocurrency is another, and I'm not necessarily sure that that's any greater price transparency. I think it's far less price transparency than you would see with dollars.
Okay. My name is Maria Veronica. I am an artist living in Dubai already a certain time. And we cannot forget that we had these pandemics involving everyone. And here we are, like nothing happened. We see each other almost the same like always. But since the title is being transparent, I would like to know, in the moment that the lockdown came, and I have been following different symposiums, one of them is the Louvre in Abu Dhabi, when they start to think where are going the institutions, and there was the question reinventing museums and all of that every single month. But what happened in the moment that the lockdown came and everyone was afraid and scary about multiple things? So if you allow me, each one of you, with those months, what you did that made you broke your rules, those rules that financially were sustaining you, and you had to do in order to assure the moment. If we can be transparent, more specifically and not diplomatically, being transparent for once in life, and in these times that we are supposed to live a new era, what did you do that when you saw yourself vulnerable and you broke the rules and you gave either discounts or broke the rules or new models of marketing? What did you do that surprised yourself?
Time for true confessions. What was your lockdown moment where you...
Otherwise we are not here.
Well, I will say that my first 6 weeks, I am also an accredited appraiser, and I had 125 pages of appraising to write, so I basically worked 7 days a week, finishing that by April 15. But I did start calling clients and saying, I think that you need to save your money, and we should try and buy work from as many galleries as we can. Who are the artists who you want? Let's see what they have. It wasn't that things were necessarily cheaper. It wasn't that. It was that there were things that were made available that were previously not available. Things that were in museum shows, things that were owned by gallerists who otherwise would not have made it available, but they were unsure what the next year would be, and so they were willing to make inventory available. Not like I said, not necessarily for an incredible price. It wasn't a steal. It was just the quality of work was great. It was very hard to find. And so they knew these clients had been buying from them, and even the same artist, buying from these artists, consistently supporting exhibitions, and so they said, fine, we give you this piece out of this museum show. It wasn't for sale. Or we give you this piece out of my own collection, and then you can have it. So that there was more, I found more work on available, more inventory of a very high quality available.
Was there more on the platform, Alex, that either were discounted or people were willing to sell?
So it was fascinating. I mean, obviously a terrible situation over the past 2 years that can't be understated, but ultimately wealthy people got a lot wealthier over that period as well, and were buying a lot more art. Maybe after a couple weeks, right in March when things locked down here, even in April, things started taking off, and I think we saw our e-commerce sales roughly triple over the last year. And not only was that more people coming into the market, a lot of new collectors who were sitting at home and realized, hey, I don't have anything I like to look at on my walls. But also what we saw on the gallery side was you had a lot more of the directors or owners of the galleries paying a lot more attention to their online sales because they had lost every other significant sales channel for the gallery, and starting to think more strategically about how do I really operationalize this for my gallery's success. And we've only seen that continue in the time since. I think there was also this question of is there going to be a COVID bump? Will things pull back once the art world goes back to in real life events like this, which I think we're all very happy to be back at. But nonetheless, we tend to see that once industries go online, they don't retreat, and that's been the case here as well.
Okay, we broke a rule. We got an Artsy account. Dead serious. Because we were like, no Artsy, we're above that. And we got an Artsy account, and we started putting things on there that was available inventory, because we've never done that. We still have a very complicated relationship with Artsy, our Artsy account, because we don't. I am kind of as forward thinking that I would like to see myself being. I am still pretty conservative about keeping up the appearance that nothing is available. And so the moment you put things on as available, you start breaking that appearance, and you start creating a perception of access that we frankly, we thrive on non-access. We thrive on exclusivity. We thrive on the fact that someone got something before it, before it even, was formatted into a PDF. It's like, and so that's my secret.
We're happy to have you.
Yeah. Oh, thanks.
That's your COVID confession for.
My COVID confession.
There was a question here.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
I'm just a low-level art lover and low-level collector, but I'm curious, what percentage of your clients buy the art just because they love it, or what percentage are also looking for appreciation potential?
I would say everyone I work with buys the art because they love it. I'm very particular about the people that I work with, though. No one wants to lose the shirt off their back, but everyone loves everything that they have. But that like I said, I'm very particular.
I think we've seen the same thing. People tend to have this idea that folks that are buying art online are in it to make a buck or aren't serious collectors. When we've surveyed folks, I think 60, 75, 80% of them are buying it purely for the enjoyment. What we do see more often, particularly among younger folks, is a desire to understand, if I'm going to put a significant portion of my net worth into a artwork, could I get out of it in the future if I needed to? Will it hold some value, or will it depreciate like any other asset that I might be comfortable with, and not just have the market and the bottom fall out of it? So I think that's where having a more liquid secondary market is really important for the art market, and having a broader secondary market, so that more folks can get comfortable with that. Because we do see that also when people resell, they're buying new artists that they love too. It's not like just an asset class.
I would say most people are both that we work with. Are smart, savvy individuals, but also genuinely are addicted to art and love it. So
I think it's people don't buy a house even though they're going to live in it for X number of years and think, great, I got this value out of it. I don't care what it costs or if it goes to zero. They bought a house. They want to know that they're going to get something out of it. And like all assets, it doesn't necessarily mean it has to appreciate. It just means it doesn't go to zero immediately. And we've seen this with lots of different classes of things, including, sorry to harp on cars for some reason of this thing, but it used to be cars dropped significantly in value as soon as you drove them off the lot. That is no longer true, and it has some serious positive and negative effects on it. There was someone in the back who, yes,
Hi.
Yes, you.
First, thank you. I think it's very helpful, all this topic, and I'm son of the artist. I promote my father's art, and I'm art collector. I think it's very important, but the most important question now, how, your technology or all the technology what is coming to the market now, convince to the real art market, gallerists, auction house, art dealers, to use to starting to use it, like how we convince them, because
I'm sorry, to use what? I couldn't hear you. Getting them to use?
How you convince them to, can you explain that question?
The price transparency.
Yeah.
I guess the price transparency is what he's.
How to make. I shouldn't answer that, but I think it happens more than anything else. It becomes an advantage. The more people who adopt it, the people who are holdouts either get squeezed because they can't. Everyone says, well, why don't you show your prices? Or they say, hey, we can still do it, and that's fine. Let them show their prices. I'm answering for you guys. Alex, do you have a...
For us, it was really just digging into the data and understanding how much of an impact it can have on gallery sales, putting out that research, and then having other friends across the industry, like Art Basel, decide to mandate public pricing for things like their OVRs. And Mark called me up one day and was like, hey, when I put out the initial research, I was like, hey, can I send this out to all my galleries? We think this is the way forwards for online as well. And I think that kind of validation across the industry and people just making it the norm rather than the exception is how you get the holdouts to come along as well.
Like Esther.
And there'll always be people who differentiate themselves by not going along with the trend. I mean, whether it's a sense of exclusivity or this is how I do business is different. There are lots of galleries. Not all galleries have, multiple locations, but there are some who've invested in that. Everyone has to find their business model within the broader array of different ways of doing business in the art world.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
There's one last one up here, and we were almost out of time, so let's get to your question, and we'll... Yep. It's on.
Hello, I'm Olivier from Belgium. Just a quick question. My collection was unsold. 40 pieces, major auction house online last year. We're talking about transparency. My collection disappeared, so it doesn't have the sale was taken off Artnet, Artprice, from your platform too. The estimates were there by directors of departments. We're talking about secrecy. I think this major auction house was trying to do me a favor by making it disappear. But this world is so small that people call me afterwards to make me offers on pieces. So the transparency on the pricing, if you're a big player, you can make it disappear. What's your view on that?
Well, let me sort of slightly turn that around. Online auctions originally, they were making it all disappear. If you sold things online, the auction houses were taking advantage of it being a different channel and saying, we're not going to keep those records public, and they would evaporate. Over time, that has changed, especially as more stuff has been sold online, and we're now seeing different types of online auction. One, more stuff being sold because of the pandemic, and then we're seeing different types of online auctions. So the record keeping is still somewhat in flux. Usually when things are taken off, it's more either at the request of, or it's my understanding is at the request of, or in the interest of the seller, so that you don't have these past lots and all floating around and turning people off. I don't know of any necessary other sort of movement towards keeping it off for other reasons. Do any of you?
I only know it as something that's part of the consignment agreement, where someone maybe, for whatever reason, they don't want it to show up, especially if it doesn't sell. They don't want it to show up in the record of that artist.
All right, I think we have hit our limit almost exactly on the nose. I like to start and stop on time. So I just want to thank Esther, Alex, and Heather for participating in this somewhat times, probing panel of a subject that people find uncomfortable. Like I said, I hope there's no sense of an answer, because there aren't answers. Esther said it perfectly. Pricing is an art, and it has many facets to it, and I think we're just seeing new phases of how prices are set and employed in the market. But thank you all for coming.